What's up, guys? Valorant closed beta is out, and so are most of NA contenders. What does that mean for Path to Pro, and is there going to be a Path to Pro left?
And after that, we'll be taking a look at Reinforce's power rankings, where we agree, where we disagree, and which games we're looking to this weekend for more answers.
I'm Avast, this is Jayne, and this is Contested. Hello, everyone. We are once again not live from the Frontier Communication Studios in Dallas, Texas. We are sheltering in place, obviously, because of the ongoing COVID crisis. But thank you guys for checking us out. And if you're supporting us from listening at Spotify, the podcast platforms, or on YouTube, which way, thank you for continuing to stay on with us. And Jayne, how are you continuing to hold up after being home for how long have we been home now? How long has it been? It's felt like months.
And it's actually felt like one day because all the days just blur into each other. Everything is tomorrow and today simultaneously, and time just doesn't exist anymore. So hopefully we can cure the boredom of some of the viewers sitting at home, or maybe not. You know, they've probably been watching 20 hours of Twitch streams just to make sure that they can't get a closed beta key into the Valorant.
People are so mad. They're so mad. I mean, I guess that takes us to the topic of today, right? That so Valorant closed beta is out. And with it came a slew of mostly tier 2, well, pretty much, I think entirely tier 2 retirements of people that were currently in Overwatch League that were playing in Contenders or part of Contenders, at least if they weren't actively playing. And obviously, you know, they seem to have keys or at least playing the plan, because most of the people I see on Twitch or Twitter are just like, key, please, key, ! Key, give me a key, please.
There's a whole bunch of people making alt accounts, like hundreds of alt accounts, just to all put them in account. And then there's also like on eBay, Valorant accounts with closed beta keys attached to them are selling for like $150, $200.
No way.
And then Riot is just banning those accounts,
as they should. I mean, like it's just Wild West out there. The memes are already legendary of like that. You know, you have the screen of like, are you in? Are you not in? And they're just saying like, psych, you thought, like putting that as the name for it. Like, it's so good, but. Going from the actual, you know, the funny parts of that all is that we have to talk about how it's affecting Overwatch and the Path to Pro ecosystem, because in that little soundbite we put out earlier is there even a Path to Pro ecosystem left at this point? Part of it because of COVID, part of it because of Valorant. Who's even left to play?
Yeah, because there's only two Contenders teams remaining. It's Envy, which, of course, one of the teams that we're affiliated with loosely.
Like academy teams, right? You're saying like the ones that actually
teams.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So the actual proper academy teams is Envy, which is Dallas Fuel's academy team, and then Uprising Academy, which is, I mean, it's up here.
Obviously
Obviously the Boston Uprising. Of course, you can kind of question out whether they're actually a tier 2 level team, but them's the ships. That's how it falls. And the rest of tier 2 is non-academy teams, still Contenders teams, but we have seen, you know, Atlanta just went on. What did they call it a hiatus?
They said hiatus is what they said. They said that it was an extended hiatus.
Do we ever really think they're going to be making another team though?
I mean,
really think they're coming back to the
because that's the problem, right? Is that, and now especially with a lot now, it depends, right? Because there could be all these older players, because a lot of the people that retired, so like listing off names like Gods, there was Sugar Free from Atlanta, I think Saucy as well from Atlanta. And the list sort of like goes on of people like that, but a lot of them have been in tier 2 for a while. And then for Sugar Free's case, I mean, he literally wouldn't have been eligible to play in Overwatch League for like another 2 years because of how young he was, maybe 3 even.
I think it's still 3, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think it's still 3 for Sugar Free. So, but a lot of those guys, there's a lot of older guys that are just like, you know, I'm in Contenders and I've been in Contenders for a while, or I've been in Overwatch League and I dropped down to Contenders, and there's no guarantee I get to move up. And recently, Montreal Rebellion also disbanded, but that was listed as sort of because of COVID problems with Overactive Media, their ownership group, saying like they laid off employees from the actual main part. They got rid of Montreal Rebellion, and they listed COVID, which could be, you know, very likely because people are getting hit hard in esports by COVID. But also that drops the number of academy teams down from 3 to 2.
You know, even if you do blame it on COVID-19, which is a completely reasonable, you know, I wouldn't say excuse, but just reason for laying off that group of people. A Contenders team, an academy team isn't something that you can just stand up, you know, at the drop of a hat. It's not something as soon as shelter in place is over, you can just bring this back. The decision to nix an academy team like that is a decision that is long lasting. These things take time to build. It's one of the main reasons that Envy kind of has behind their academy team, is that they're looking properly to facilitate the development of players that they can recruit then into the fuel and in the future also from the Dallas Fort Worth area. So this is like a developmental project. And if you were to try and shut down that project for, a month or something like that, those players would go elsewhere, your staff would go elsewhere. There's no guarantees you're getting them back. And even if you do, you're starting from pretty much square one. So a team like Montreal Rebellion disbanding, Atlanta's Academy team, they're disbanding as well. Like these teams they're gone. They're not something that you can just bring back in the same form that they were. So, it's no matter what you call the reason, the end result is that they're gone and they're very likely not coming back.
And there's just a lack, and the problem is it's twofold, right? Because it's the ongoing problems with Path to Pro, and then also you bring in COVID as well. And it's like, well, is there even a point to doing it right now too? Because we have, and I think Flame, the former GM of the Outlaws, brought up an excellent point, which is before we get into like another thing that I want to bring up is that, do I want to spend the money running an academy team right now when I could potentially spend that exact same money to grab some team in a early closed beta team in Valorant, and then I get to compete in the pro circuit? That's going to inevitably happen, whether it's done by Riot or it's like TOs, right? You have a much greater chance at like a new game, but potentially getting some return there than you do currently in Overwatch, because also there's who knows if those players on Academy are going to get moved up, right? Because that's where really the Academy revenue comes from. It's not from sponsorships. It's not from any sort of content deals. It's from selling players to Overwatch League teams. And some teams have had great success. I would say Boston in particular, and even Envy have had good success moving players up to their main roster or selling them. But not every team has. And so then it begs the question of like, is this really sustainable during this time, or could we shift our resources elsewhere? And then that's already compounding upon the fact that where's the talent, right? Like there's no other region that's producing consistent talent, especially on tank and supports right now, other than Korea and China, because they've had the most consistent ecosystem. So it also brings up like the two roads diverging, Jayne. Like which way do we go now from here? Does this open up all the space for a bunch of fresh new talent to come in? Because a lot of those guys in tier 2 were old guard. They'd been there a while. They've been in tier 2 on Academy for a while. They've been in Overwatch League previously and dropped down. And so we've sort of refreshed the system. We've done a cleanse, whichever cleanse you may have felt, the lemon juice and pepper cleanse of Overwatch. Or is it now we've created a feedback loop forever where the same people are going to be playing the game forever and only one region is really bringing up anyone new?
Yeah, it's the diversification which you talked about with Flame is a big important thing for the actual esports organizations, but the talent and where we're actually going to source them from is another kind of big question. Of course, Korean Contenders has been the main kind of feeding ground for that new talent. Any Contenders has had some success, but not nearly as much as Korean. A lot of people just consider the esports ecosystem in Korea to be much stronger. And then you can get, like, we can foreseeably see a future, especially with tier 2, degrading a little bit in a way where the current players who are in the Overwatch League are just going to be traded around. That's kind of something that it's more familiar in a CSGO esports ecosystems where the average age is much higher. And, if there are going to be team swaps, it's mostly not as much as people retiring and new people coming in to fill those places, but it's a very much a situation where the players trade between teams a lot. And Overwatch League, with the actual kind of depth of strategy, definitely lends itself more towards having veterans just trading teams a lot. If you've gone through the goats meta, the sniper, like double sniper meta, dive meta, all of those things, if the meta ever returns to those things, then you have that experience. You have all of the things that you went through during that meta to try and learn and figure out like what worked, what didn't work on a team level, on a macro level scale that you can't even get as a solo player. If you are trying to bring some new blood into the Overwatch League, if you have missed these metas, then you are objectively a worse player, a worse candidate for those teams, because there's so many little micro things, so many different ways of functioning as a team that these veteran players can fall back into. Kind of like, the GOATS one of, trading cooldowns, the double snipers with space control, the dive with staging, all of these different things. As an individual player, especially if you're grinding ranked or you're grinding simply lower tier teams and like the play level at tier 2 with Academy leaving, those words are hard. The level of play in tier 2 is going to be decreasing. And then you have hero pools on top of that, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, but that's also going to drag down the actual level of gameplay, not only at tier 2 and tier 1 as well, so that these really highly regimented, very well explored metas where players learned a lot and really progressed as professional players, those situations aren't going to exist anymore. So the players who have experienced those, the veterans, have experience, unique experience that new players joining in with the pro scene simply aren't going to have. And I think that's probably another point against bringing in this new blood tier 2. It's that these pros are really the ones that, like pros are, the veterans have a lot more worth than just bringing up a really talented, mechanically gifted player. This route knowledge, experience in the metas is going to go a long distance for a long time in Overwatch.
See, that's interesting, because also I do think that those are valid points, but it's interesting though, because when I hear that because also when I talk to other people within the scene, especially those that are currently the remainder in tier 2, because there are other teams, right? Mm-hmm. There's like Noble, there's Sky Foxes, there's T1 or Third Impact, not T1, it's Third Impact, and technically T1 I think is still in Korea. But sort of the scouting report is all the pug teams filled with really younger / players that haven't been on many academy teams are kind of just pounding everybody right now. And that brings up the fact that with hero pools, it's so different. It's so chaotic at times, right? But then, and also hearing from Overwatch League scouts before is that generally they've favored mechanical intensity over the veteran presence at times for a lot of these people when they're looking for new scouts. Do you think that's sort of just something that maybe a select few teams were just prioritizing, and then others are saying we don't care about it as much? Like, because it seems like some teams are definitely going to find value in those very mechanically intensive players that are those new players that are fresh off the ladder or been in tier 2 for a little bit lesser of a time. Or is the veteran presence in your mind always going to beat them out?
I think the veteran presence is going to beat them out as long as you're kind of comparing them in a way where they are in an equal footing. When you're talking about these tier 2 teams, where teams with extremely mechanically gifted players, or teams that are just like super aggressive kind of superstar groups work well, I think that definitely lends itself to, at least historically within Overwatch, player-run teams being extremely successful. You had groups like Second Wind, even Atlanta was something like that, where they had these really kind of aggressive players. GOAT's another good example of it. They had aggressive players, maybe not the best players across the board, but really good team synergy and kind of like trust in the team, good communication, good teamwork. And I think that those kind of factors, when you actually have that and you allow your team to really operate quite aggressively and be able to adapt to your opponents, that's based off of the actual team cohesion as a whole. And I think we've seen it numerous times where you take an individual who was a superstar on a certain team that was player run and put them in a more regimented environment, maybe it doesn't work nearly as well. So at the lower tiers where you do have this kind of, mechanical, the more kind of wild west of Overwatch, where it is a lot scrappier, a lot less regimented and focused down into terms of compositions or, proper professional Overwatch, that kind of environment is really well suited to those kind of gifted superstars, prodigies in that regard. But when you take those individuals out of those environments, there's no way that you can perfectly replicate like a team environment, the actual qualitative part of a team. If you take a person who operates well in a player run team and you put them in, a very heavily regimented team with a lot of staff and a lot of prep and a lot of drills, those individuals might not actually be able to really show the skills that allow them to actually make it to tier 2 or really show off in the semi-professional scene. I do think there's different strengths. When you really go into the professional, you need to start working with your team, working with your coaches, refining compositions, having set strategies, where the chaos of the lower ranks, where you can kind of just adapt and crush people based off of pure confidence and team synergy, that doesn't exist nearly as much in the upper echelons of play, in my opinion.
The chaos sort of lineage, which to be fair, I think there's definitely some value to that statement, because player run teams do fall apart, or players from player run teams can sometimes fall apart when getting to the Overwatch League. I do think that in general, Overwatch League teams often are sort of split on the concept of like raw mechanics versus veteran presence, which is why we often get like a mix, right? Like some teams, like let's say for example Gladiators, which we'll talk about later, they bring in like players like Space and OG, which have been in Overwatch League for a while, but then you combine it with players like Mirror, who's fresh from the contender scene and has been really good in contenders and a lot of talent, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes you got to mix and match the two of like, do you get the most value out of the two? But also we sort of diverge from the point here, because I guess going back to our original statement is it bad or is it good that Valorant has stripped the tier 2 scene of all these old guard players and a lot of players that could have been sticking around for a while? My hypothesis is that I think it's actually, you could argue how good it is for the game overall, but when we talk about the overall health of players' mindsets in the scenes, I think it's better.
Yes.
Simply because if you aren't enjoying the game currently, if you have been stuck in tier 2 currently, and you don't think you're going to make it out anytime soon, it's better for you to go somewhere where you think you can have the opportunity, you might enjoy it more, than sticking around a game that you're not having the same drive or passion for anymore. And that includes current Overwatch League pros. There might very well be Overwatch League pros from this year that would retire and move to Valorant or some other game the following year, right?
Absolutely possible.
And that's good.
We've seen Sinatra was talking about streaming Valorant for like 8 to 12 hours a day. But that aside, you get the situation where I don't think that it's the fault of Valorant that the tier 2 scene in Overwatch is failing. And it does seem likely, I suppose, that the tier 2 scene is degrading or falling apart. It has no one to blame except for Overwatch itself.
Yeah.
And really, the thing is that prior to Valorant actually releasing, there wasn't really the opportunity for people who were dissatisfied with Overwatch to go anywhere. Where are you going to go from Overwatch? Are you going to go to CSGO? Are you going to go to an extreme
Dota 2 League? Like there's nowhere you go, right?
There's nowhere to go. So Valorant
even
is
Fortnite
kind of
players are retiring. Like tier 1 Fortnite players, like Som, who was the runner-up in World Cup, the Fortnite World Cup, he's going to Valorant as well. So I don't think it's a uniquely Overwatch problem, but I do think it's something to say that, considering we've lost how many tier 2 like league players have been, like, granted it's a very different game, but the point remains of like just how many left comparatively, because people are going to leave. It's just a question of how many.
And there's definitely people. This same sort of thing happened with Apex Legends, where when Apex Legends came out, a whole bunch of like tier 2 and tier 3 players who were people who were realistically never going to go pro went over to Apex Legends to try and go pro just based off of being like the Gen 1 pros. They're usually we talked about this earlier. Actually, I guess it was in the pre-show, so the audience hasn't heard this yet. But usually the first generations of pros in any esports title is going to be the people who are professionals in previous games or who have quite a few connections with professionals. That's just the way things go. Once you actually have a little bit of an established team and somebody can really truly prove themselves to be capable of playing with the old guard, for lack of a better term, then you're really going to start to get these second generation pros, the people who went pro for the very first time in any game in the game that they're in. So like Valorant, for example. So most of the people who go pro in Valorant are going to be people from Overwatch, people from Fortnite, people from, of course, CSGO. And that's really just the opportunities there. You're also going to get the situation where, people talk about Valorant being such an aim-intensive game that Overwatch players aren't going to find success in. But you're looking at situations like Bishu, for example, is a great example where he was a professional player in League before he came over to Overwatch. And I'm very much of the opinion that being professional is more about a mindset and a dedicated mentality, where if you actually need to improve your mechanics in order to become a professional in Valorant, and really that's where your heart is set, you're going to be able to achieve that. It's just a matter of practice, actual dedicated, focused work. It's like people are very much shitting on support and tank players in particular, but there's like OG in particular, I know plays ranked quite a bit on Widowmaker, for example, and you can't tell me that people like Jonak wouldn't be able to find success in Valorant if they wanted to. So the kind of the mockery of people in Overwatch wanting to switch over to Valorant to be pros, I don't think that that's really a figure. It might take a little bit longer for them to get back up to the level, but going pro in one game is really, I don't think, that much different to going pro in the other games. It's just the amount of transferable skills is really how long it's going to take that person to be capable. But if people aren't happy in Overwatch and think that Valorant's going to be their way out, if they're already a pro, they have those skills. But if they were tier 3 in Overwatch, they're probably just going to stay tier 3 in Valorant.
And we do bring up, I think sometimes I'm guilty of it too, of like bringing up the straw man of like, oh, well, you were bad in this game, so we bad in the next. Also was really bad in another game, but had a lot of success in this game was like Super. Super was not good at TF2. I was way better at Super in TF2. I was way better. Like he was essentially the hard stuck tier 2 in TF2 when there was not even really a tier 2. And he's coming to Overwatch, and I would think by all metrics, he was definitely way better at me than I was Overwatch. And that's just like the truth, right? And so there isn't always a guaranteed, like, as long as you don't have spaghetti hands, like just true spaghetti hands where you flop around like a bunch of limp noodles, like, and you already have the right mindset, you'll probably be good. It's just, we'll have to see, and we'll have to see if tier 2 makes any adjustments, right? Or if we just go into the sort of cycle of the same players that exist for the rest of all time that are getting their money. And also that isn't necessarily a bad thing, because take, for example, Dota 2, where it's the same scene for the most part, even CSGO, and people really enjoy it, but it's not necessarily a good thing either. It just depends on how it balances out in terms of like how the esport evolves from there. It's more of it's a thing, and it's sort of just how it works. Mm-hmm. So we have to see exactly, does tier 2 change at all? And also, do we get any more NA or EU players? Like, there's probably so few out there, right? Yeah. And there probably will be more, but it seems like the only regions that are even capable of actually having a pipeline for players at this point is South Korea and China. That's it. There's no academy team. There's no support if you're in NA or EU. Like, people always said, if you're in EU, you got to come to an A. Like, EU is a wasteland. You have to move, not just in the ranked environment, but like literally in the support environment. You have to go to an A because that's where the academy teams are. But now the academy teams are gone too. And so you're like, well, where do you even go as a player if you need support and you need the financial stability to grind the game to get good and to build the connections, right? Because you can get really good pretty fast, honestly. You can have a lot of talent, but you can't get money really fast just playing video games unless you have some sort of support. Yeah. You need to have something to give you the stability to go pro, because you can't, most people don't want to do, as Taimu said it, like, I just DJ no life in Finland living off state assistance. Like, most people probably can't do that to go pro in a game, you know?
It's not possible. They really want to. So, you know, then there's always kind of the cloud hanging over Overwatch just before we do move on to the next segment, because we've harped on
probably run over a bit, I'd imagine.
Probably run over a bit. Yeah. But, you know, there's always the question mark that Overwatch League, now that it has kind of established itself, and you even see teams like London, like Los Angeles Valiant themselves kind of cutting costs. You know, it's not just it's the Overwatch League teams, of course, are the ones who own the academy teams, but we're not just seeing cuts solely focused on academy. We have seen like main rosters be cut or at least scaled back on. And now that these organizations have actually bought into the Overwatch League, and the Overwatch League is more or less established and now is kind of like a growth phase, are these kind of teams just kind of going into more or less hibernation until the league has grown a little bit? You know, there is from like year one, people were talking about like a 5 to 10 year ROI in terms of like their investment. They're expecting this to be larger once we have a more global league. You know, until the league is more global, is there really that much need for a tier 2 Overwatch? Like, how much of a improvement to the league overall is it to actually increase the level of gameplay? You know, we've objectively seen hero pools reduce the tier of play. You know, it's moved to different skills regarding who wins and who loses, but it is objectively worse Overwatch, in the same way where if you had worse players, as long as you have the personalities and the storylines, is it any less watchable, any less entertaining? I think that's debatable. So maybe these teams and the league as a whole are kind of going into hibernation during COVID-19, as well as kind of just waiting for more global expansion into other cities with more teams.
Really just depends on how expansion affects that. And speaking of expansion, now that we can move over, is that an expansion team is currently on top of of Reinforce's power rankings. You know, obviously Reinforce is one of the analysts for the Overwatch League currently on the quote unquote desk, but obviously it's at home, so there is no real desk happening there. But he put out his power rankings recently, and they're pretty interesting when you consider the lack of games that some teams have played and the difference in metas, because the top 3 are Titans, Dynasty, and Fusion is where Reinforce puts them, obviously. And it's not objectively terrible in terms of the results, right? Because all those teams are doing pretty good result-wise. But Titans and Dynasty have both only played 2 games.
Yes, they have.
That's it. Yeah. And Titans haven't played since like week 1, week 2. Like, it's been an incredibly long time. A very, very long time since we've seen any of like really Titans play in particular.
So you should be able to see Reinforce's power rankings on your screen right now, or just previously. But yeah, as Vast was saying, the top 3 are Vancouver Titans, Seoul Dynasty, and Philadelphia Fusion. And this is, I don't know, props to Reinforce, props to Johnny for actually putting out a list like this, because if I was ever asked to put out a power ranking this early with this many kind of unknowns, there would be asterisks everywhere. It's be like, this is here because, but could be here. You know, I'd almost want to do kind of the scientific approach where I'd put them at like sixth place with an uncertainty of +or -2 or something.
Yeah, but at that point, is it even power rankings, right? Like, it's the same problem.
Rankings.
It's like, you can always be like, well, it's like, okay, well, anyone can say, I think this team is within this spot to 3 to 4 of other spots, right? Like, so then it's like, I have to respect Johnny for putting it out there. Like,
first of all, before we kind of tear into this, props to Johnny for actually putting himself on the line and actually publishing a fully solid 1 to 20 list. But let's start with the top 3. Vancouver Titans, Seoul Dynasty, and Philadelphia Fusion. Now, in the video that Reinforce put out, he previously had the Titans and the Seoul Dynasty listed in their orders, and just said that he wasn't going to change them because they hadn't played. So props to him. But first off, do you think that Reinforce is correct in saying that the Vancouver Titans are first in the league?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so, but I also don't think it's not like absurd.
No.
Right? Yeah. Like, I wouldn't say they're necessarily first, but it's not absurd to say they could be. It's more of just, I need to see more of them, honestly. They also had one of the few matches they played was a very close match versus Gladiators.
It was.
Yes. So if they came out the gate swinging and just demolished both the teams they played, I'd be like, okay, that's more reasonable to me. But considering that Gladiators have been looking pretty good and they had a very close match versus Gladiators, because remember, Titans core, for the most part, other than Fissure replacing Bumper, or and some people could say just devouring Bumper, seeing him walk around his jersey and stuff, he's absorbed the essence of Bumper, his life essence. But other than that, their roster has remained relatively static, while Gladiators had a very big overhaul. Mm-hmm. And they've been performing extremely well, even in that first week week or two versus Titans. So I don't think you can come right off the bat and say, like, yeah, Titans are going to be number one. Like, I really can't agree with that myself. I don't know how you feel about that, but I can't
wait for the actual the runaway stands to just completely murder you on Twitter. But
no, I mean, why would they be mad at me? Fissure's the one that took out Bumper. Just that he fired the shot, not me. What did I do?
You're not standing the Vancouver Titans, but no, I do agree with you. And I think that really the only measuring stick out of all of the measuring sticks that we could possibly have are the Los Angeles Gladiators. And I do think that they started a little bit weaker, and they have improved as the league has gone on. And the Los Angeles Gladiators are a team that have played both the Seoul Dynasty and the Vancouver Titans. And as you said, the match against the Vancouver Titans was really close. But the Seoul Dynasty, the other team that's only played 2 matches, has dumpstered both of the teams that they played. And one of those teams was the Los Angeles Gladiators, which are looking really, really good. So if we're going to kind of nitpick here, I definitely think that Seoul Dynasty is the clear pick for number 1. Vancouver Titans, there's not enough information for you to put them anywhere else other than like 2 or 3. But yeah, I'd say he's got the number 1 and number 2 correct, being Reinforced. I've just maybe put Seoul Dynasty above based on their results against the Gladiators and the fact that Seoul Dynasty really didn't look too much trouble dispatching them.
And that does sound weird because they've also only played 2 matches. Yeah. But I have more confidence in Seoul after watching those matches than I currently do Gladiators, at least. Now, it might be recency bias, but like, they destroyed Gladiators while Titans did not.
Yeah, and this is really going to be the theme for the power ranking, I think, is that we don't really have enough reason to like really thoroughly justify them being as high as they are, but we have reasons to justify everybody else being lower.
So. And also, I think that then really what we have to talk about is that moving beyond the top 3. Moving beyond the top 3 is that it goes New York, Eternal Dragons, Reign. Like, Shock's not even like, where is Shock is 9. Yeah. Shock is 9. I mean, I get that they started out kind of weak, and that's fair. But to put them below Dragons, who have sort of been in a circle of suck scenario, until recently,
you think the Dragons are overrated here?
I think the Dragons are overrated here. Really? I agree. I actually tend to agree. I tend to agree with a lot of it, other than Dragons, because Dragons have only been playing Hunter Spark Charge. Yeah, and Hunters are once again going back doing like they're he puts them in 11 here. I think like on the official rankings, if we look at where they're currently at, like looking at their current placements, their overall is also about middle of the pack or something. No, they're 1 and 3. They're 1 and 3. What am I saying? They're not middle of the pack at all. So the point is that how does beating Hunters or even losing to Hunters somehow guarantee you a spot higher than Shock?
I think, and to be fair, the 1 to 3 for the Chengdu Hunters, 2 of those games were best of 5 matches.
Yeah, but it's still Hunters, right? Like, They got to play ball. They still have to play ball. They don't have a main tank player, right? Well, actually, they sort of.
And two of their losses also came during the Hero Pools week where ball was banned, and they really looked out of their element. So I think Chengdu.
I mean, I would think that should be a good reason to think that they're not that great of a team. And if you go to map by if one hero is banned and your team crumbles, then that should be.
I mean, specialists are going to specialize. What can I say about this one?
That's disastrous, I think.
Yeah, and like the Shanghai Dragons, I think the point against them, I suppose, is that loss to the Chengdu Hunters. But if there's any loss that you can justify as being like, well, it is what it is. It's against the Chengdu Hunters. Like, they're specialists. They're ridiculous. Yeah. They're flanky. They don't play like anything else. And then as soon as the Shanghai Dragons, they lost to them, they played them the next week, and they beat the ever-living shit out of them.
Yeah. That's all
they
true.
Improved, and they also have the same kind of mentality as the Seoul Dynasty. They've got, like, the Seoul Dynasty coaching staff and the Shanghai Dragons coaching staff seem to have that same mentality, which is prepare one composition, one kind of cookie cutter composition. You can play everywhere, play it well, know all the different scenarios and how you can adapt to it instead of trying to rely on chaos or build strategies for every single composition, every single map that are unique, which the Gladiators are doing quite well but I definitely think the Shanghai Dragons are actually, pretty reasonably ranked. And if anything, the two teams that I think on this list are extremely overranked or overrated are the New York Excelsior and the Atlanta Reign.
Why? Okay, so I can justify Reign. I can see where you come from, Reign, but why New York?
Okay. Do you know, like, which? So New York has.
Don't you dare tell me sandbagging, Jayne. Don't you dare tell me sandbagging.
They're not sandbagging. Who are their wins against?
I know at least Boston a couple times.
Rank
right?
20. Rank 19, rank 18, rank 17, and rank 14. They have just they've just been kicking children. That's all they've been doing.
Kicking children, he says.
Like, they're reaching into the cradle and just sucker punching toddlers. That's really all they're doing. They haven't given us any reason to be any
in that case, we have to also talk about then, just because I get your point that you're going for, and we might as well link it in now, because this up too, with Fusion. Yeah. Fusion is ranked 3 on this, and they're just like New York. They've beaten Defiant, Mayhem, Justice, Boston, Justice again. Does Fusion deserve to go top 3?
Fusion's had better results. Their one loss was against, I believe, the Paris Eternal, which is another really quite solid team. And Paris Eternal, the match against them was, I believe, a game 5 there. But really, this is the question about actually matching these divisions. The Atlantic division is so weak. So it's
which is funny because it's like pretty much it was weak season 1 and then it was not that weak season 1 because we had New York was part of it. No, actually it was still weak. It's always been weak, hasn't it? Yeah. Has Atlantic Division ever been good? Like really good? Has Atlantic Division ever been good outside of like New York and and then Fusion, I guess, once?
Yeah, Fusion's now they're better now than I think they've ever been.
Yeah.
But Paris Eternal, they're one loss to the Paris Eternal. Paris Eternal, I think, is a good team. There's this massive question mark about the Paris Eternal in that their one loss, or sorry, they've lost twice, but one of their losses was to the Houston Outlaws. They got 3-0'd by the Houston Outlaws. And
yeah,
that was bizarro world. So
to be fair, I put that almost Hunter's tier because after talking, because I did an interview with Blase shortly after that, and he was like, "Yeah, we just sort of said, let's just play whatever, and they did, and they won. So like, I almost put that Hunter's tier in a way. So yeah. I kind of can discount because also I do believe in a universe that Houston has never been a team objectively in terms of its talent that's like bottom tier, because it's always had some ability, especially this year, even to be above that. Mm-hmm. It's more the fact that like they collectively have like how many? There's 6 people starting, so they collectively have like 12 left feet and can never walk the correct direction. It's like NASCAR with people, and they're walking left the entire time, and they can never go forward because for some reason they just can never put it together ever. Even with changing players, but they actually have okay talent. So I think them losing to Houston wasn't absurd. I'd actually replace Fusion with Paris in my top 3 right now.
Really? Yeah. I definitely think that Philadelphia Fusion and the Paris Eternal are 3 and 4, which version they're in. I would have leaned towards Philadelphia Fusion being ranked 3 and Paris Eternal being 4, but the other way around seems completely reasonable to me. We don't really have that much information. Like I know one of the reasons that in this power ranking, Reinforce actually dropped the Paris Eternal down to promote of all teams the New York Excelsior above the Paris Eternal was that Hip retired, but Hip's replacement is Gray.
Hip's replacement. Hip's a replacement. It's like Eep, right? I think that's like the French pronunciation. All the French people told me it's Eep, but it sounds funnier if you say hip replacement to me.
Yeah,
that sounds a lot funnier.
Gray's hip replacement. Yeah,
Gray's hip replacement.
Gray is a fantastic flex support. Always has been. I've been in trials where he's been trying out as flex support. He's a great player. I don't think that Paris Eternal's level of play is really going to drop down. And if Hip or Heap wasn't motivated, and that was the reason he retired, it's like he just. I don't think he gave exact reasons, but it definitely sounded like he simply wasn't motivated to play Overwatch anymore. And having a player like Gray, who was probably chomping at the bit for the chance to prove himself on the starting lineup, the fact that he retired and is being replaced by a player as capable as Gray, and that probably also improves the morale on the team. Like, I think that's only reasons to say, like, hey, yeah, this is actually probably looking up. They fixed a problem we didn't even know they had.
But you do remember now they have one less Frenchie. They have one less Frenchman, and now it's Gray. And so, sure, Gray's very, but it's sort of the general
European rule. Though
he is, but that's not the point. The point is, it's about the French people. And so, generally, how the rule has been is that you either have full French or you have one French, and there is no in between. Generally, now Paris actually seems to be an exceptionally good job. So they might just because they have like a Korean coaching staff that's very good at what they do, and a Korean GM as well with 9K who worked under Krusty. So maybe they're like doing a great job of actually just keeping everyone on like. We're not losing motivation. We're not flaming each other. We're going to play the game. We're going to be good at the game. And we're not going to get really pissy at each other, which sometimes can happen. Now, that was more of a meme than it was an actual commentary on things. But I feel like it's like a lot of memes where it's sort of, there's a kernel of truth hidden within there. And we'll see like what happens, especially since they've been utilizing Nico and Binbest a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they are both French. And so they could decrease their synergy a bit without having a French flex support. But I think now that we've sort of dissected, and I don't even say it's to dissect as much. That's too generous. We started the dissection like in a middle school way, and then we just like pounded upon like the dissected like without actually like finishing the assignment, But Fusion Paris is one of the games because we were just talking about them, and they're a match to watch for this weekend coming up. And it's very exciting because I just said I think Paris should be top 3. Reinforce thinks Fusion should be top 3. And now we can finally see how they're going to perform against each other because they have they? I think it's been a while since they played before. It's a rematch, isn't it? Yes, it is. It's a rematch. It is. Yes. It is a rematch. And last time,
Fusion lost. It was Paris.
Fusion lost.
Won,
that is correct.
It was a best of 5 game though.
That's also true. So I do think that it's going to be a very interesting rematch considering how consistent at least Fusion has been and how strong Paris have been looking.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to look at just like the key parts about those teams. And for Paris, at least, it's like with the new bans that are going to be for this week, because remember, Reaper's banned, so you won't be seeing as much Reaper. You don't have Sombra. So does this mean Xe comes back to play McCree? Because Xe was also absent last weekend. In addition, you have Gray coming in for flex support. So does them losing their flex support and losing that synergy matter that much? Does getting Xe back for the week because he can play McCree and just dominate because he looks so good, is that really going to just tip the scales back in their favor?
And on top of that, I know that a lot of people from Fusion are going to be looking forward to Poco. He's got to kind of rise to the occasion, but at the same time, we got to remember that the bans for this week do include D.Va. So D.Va is banned this weekend. Poco's, his most famous role is gone, and it's much more likely that the compositions that are going to be played this week are going to be double shield, and then with the Sombra and the Reaper band as well, it's much more likely that we are going to go back into a May plus hit scan world where Xe is going to thrive. So definitely, in terms of the actual bans, I think the Paris Eternal do have the advantage there.
And where's Fury, by the way? Speaking of Poco, where's Fury? Fury was touted as like the best off tank in the world or in the Overwatch League at least previously. Yeah. And Poco's been playing over almost the entire time. In double shield and D.Va, it's always been Poco. That's crazy if you think about it. That feels like hoarding. It feels like, right now during COVID, like people are getting charged criminally.
Against him, so they bought him.
Yeah, they just bought. That's what it feels like. It's like in COVID where people are buying out essential supplies and then they get charged for it because like it's hoarding and price gouging. That's what I feel like Fusion are doing with Fury. It's like, no. He's ours now. And then they're just going to play Poco anyways. Like, where is Fury? Like, it seems pretty incredible to me that Fury is not playing over Poco, even though Poco's been playing very well, right? Mm-hmm. It's not that Poco's been playing badly. It's not that Fusion have been playing badly with Poco. It's just, where's Fury? Like, I just have to think, like, are we going to see him this weekend? Probably not, because Poco's been playing Orisa when they've been playing Double Shield.
Whenever these kind of questions come up, it always makes me wonder kind of what's going on behind the scenes and what are kind of the qualitative factors. There's so many things from communication to teamwork, synergy. Questions. Unless the actual coach or the staff or maybe even one of the players comes out and gives us a reason why this is happening, I think we have to assume that it's just like behind the scene reasons. Yeah. There's never going to be like a, especially when you're talking about two off-tank players as good as Poco and Fury, the decision between the two of them is very, very rarely going to be based off statistics. It's more or less going to be how do they actually function as cohesive pieces of the team. So that question's unfortunately probably going to have to remain unanswered unless one of the team or coaches want to enlighten us poor
unless they decide to say like whatever the reason may be. But moving on from, and I think I should actually go ahead and say that I'm favoring Paris. Who are you favoring in the matchup for that previously talked about?
I think with the Diva ban and it moving back towards May McCree meta and XC playing, I'm also favoring Paris.
So it's music to my ears, Jayne. But to the next matchup that we have to really talk about, because it ties into the power rankings too, is that going back to those power rankings that we were talking about earlier, is that Reinforce had Shock at 9, which is very, very low, I think. But then Gladiators at 8.
Yeah. I think this is,
and they're going to match. They're going to play again this weekend.
Yeah, and I think this is really Gladiators' opportunity to show that they are like really, truly competitors. They've looked better. They've looked very well prepared. Like they haven't looked nearly as chaotic or other teams, regardless of what the meta has been. They've approached it very smartly and with multiple different solutions. They've never really been caught off guard in the same way that you had the Shanghai Dragons losing to Chengdu or a few of those other examples where just meta didn't favor
or even
them.
shocked the Gladiators earlier.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and like this is really going to be Shock's time to shine. And based off of Deepay's tweets, now Deepay's tweets are Deepay's tweets.
Hey, they're always a force that hits you with like several G's of just like shoulder power,
just like unmitigated confidence. But especially in the most recent games this weekend, he definitely seemed to feel like there's still room left. There's still gas in the tank for them to go farther, to play better, to be more dangerous, more powerful. And if they are really kind of put their word to the test, then I think this is the weekend to show it. And it is kind of a weird storyline here in the fact that the Gladiators are really trying to prove themselves to be good, while as the San Francisco Shock are trying to prove themselves to be not bad. it's like
you're right. You're 100% right.
Seriously, guys, we're still good. We haven't fallen off. We're not washed. We're still relevant.
I do think it's like a little, perhaps like a little bit reactive to how people have placed them to put them at 9, honestly, since they had one bad weekend, especially after how good they were last year. But also, I mean, there's cases that happening all the time. And I think the players to watch for Shock for this matchup this weekend are going to be Violet and Choi, because Violet has honestly not had a great flex support performance so far during this year. Yeah. And they're always memeing him, all the Shock players, about how he's never practicing his heroes in ranked. He's playing like tank and DPS and stuff. And his Moira has been, his Ana has been not good either. And so he's really a linchpin to see, because his Zen is fantastic. His Zen is incredibly good. He's just a hardcore fragger. But we need to see some, like, hopefully some stabilization from Violet there. Like, more often than not, it's just like over aggression often. And then for Choi, is Choi going to play? Which I'm assuming at this point they've finalized the roster. Like, yeah, Choi's playing all the time, especially with Sinatra essentially saying that he's not going to play Overwatch for like a month, pretty much, because of his streaming Valorant. That Choi will be playing all the time with like Ons or Striker or Architect. And does Choi also have a more consistent performance? Because those two players are the linchpin. You need Violet to perform better because when he's on his game, he's a top 3 flex support, top 2 even. And B, you don't want a feeding flex support. And then for Choi, he has just incredible, consistent carry moments for the Shock that we saw last year, and even so far this year, like last weekend. So they need to be at their A game if they're going to have any chance of beating the Gladiators, who have just looked so good so far at times.
And I think one of the things that, again, we have to bring up, we talked about it with Poco and the Philadelphia Fusion, is the fact that D.Va is banned and Choi Hoban is by far his best, at least in my opinion. I don't think that's really that controversial to say that Choi Hoban is the absolute best at his best when he's playing on the D.Va. Whereas Space so far, especially with the way that the Gladiators have been playing, this very flexy style of Overwatch, Space has looked extremely good flexing to a whole bunch of different tanks. So Choi Hoban's going to be more relegated, more likely this weekend to either the second tank. It's unlikely, I think, with May being back that we'll see more Zarya, but Choi Hoban's actual effectiveness or ability to impact the game is certainly reduced when he's not on his signature picks, and we are going back to this more double shield meta. Talking about the Los Angeles Gladiators, though, on the other half, we talked about this kind of switch between the veteran and the rookie. Two of the players that we really need to look at for the Los Angeles Gladiators this weekend are going to be OG. We need to see more of him, and Mirror. So Mirror had this kind of like feast or famine style on the Doomfist. Now, are they actually going to play Doomfist? Do they think that's still good enough to be in the meta based off of the hero pools this week? We'll have to see. But Mirror, if he is going to be playing, and he's going to be playing in a way that he's supported by, Zarya bubbles and Defense Matrix and all the Brigida health packs, we're going to have to see how he actually functions in a more kind of like a more team-based style rather than he's on Doomfist, go in, try and kill everything. We'll try and support you, and if you get slept, we're still going to somehow save you. But so the rookie Mirror, definitely a guy who we've seen good mechanical performances on, but if we aren't going to be seeing that same sort of all-in Doomfist playstyle from the Los Angeles Gladiators, there's still room to be seen whether or not he's actually going to be performing, at the level that's required if Gladiator does want to break into the top 5.
Especially since Gladiators have been so sort of defined by their aggressive style so far. And it's led a lot by OG. And OG is another one of those leaders, one that contrast between veteran and rookie is that OG is a hyper aggressive player. In fact, I would probably argue he is most stylistically similar to Fissure.
Yes.
In how he plays.
That's exactly who I would have listed.
Yeah, exactly. It's very similar to Fissure, where he's a high carry potential tank as long as you're in. And also even Bumper. That includes Bumper too. Yeah. As long as you're in, you're going, you're not stopping. And we haven't seen OG on Gladiators yet this year play sort of a very more passive double shield, or at least a more balanced, double shield, slower Ryan, even like that, or even like a dive type of thing. It's always been, I'm Reinhardt, I'm getting bubbled, I'm going full time, or D.Va, I'm getting Matrix. And we're in following up Mirror. We're in following up someone else. We're in always. And so what's it like if OG is out? And I don't know exactly what their position's going to be there, how they're going to hold up in a more balanced or a slower type of play style if that's what they choose to play, because the Doomfist could be very viable without a Sombra and without Reaper there. Doomfist can be very playable still. It's just more of a question of, do they really want to commit to that style when you can play May McCree and things like that? Is that really what they want to commit to?
Because if they do play May McCree, what are the chances that we actually see Mirror played at all?
I think because they have brought in Jaru in a lot for Hanzo specifically, and he has been very good at Hanzo when he played. But then the thing is that because you're probably not going to take out, because Birdring has been playing most of the time.
Yeah, and Birdring's looking quite good. He's not looking like tier 1 superstar, but he's definitely looking pretty close.
So I think that's the question to be answered for Gladiators is, do they just keep ooga boogoing in and just going all the time? Is that just how they're going to define themselves? Which is, you can make it work even when the metas aren't it's like Dallas played Tracer into Torb, which isn't and even Moira at times, which it's not ideal, but you can do it if you're really good and that's the style you want to play. And if that's the style they choose to play, I would even say they're less hamstrung by the picks to play that style than Dallas was to play Tracer. So they can make it work. It's just, is that always going to work? And how do they look if they have to play more balanced? If they have to play more conservative, how do they look from there? And so we have to look at those two players to sort of set the pace for them and what style they're going to be playing.
So we looked at Reinforce's power rankings, talked about some of the matches that we're looking forward to this weekend to get some more answers about where those teams actually lie on the actual rankings. But what do you guys think? Let us know in the comment section below, or depends on your platform, I suppose. But let us know. We always take a look at the comments, whether you're on Twitch, Twitter, or YouTube. Drop us a comment. Let us know what you think, and we'll read off your comments next week, which would be our next show is Tuesday, 5 p.m. Central. But we also had some comments from last Tuesday's episode. Did you want to read out some of those, Avast?
Yeah, we can start with Cunning Chaos, actually, because last week we asked, or not last week, but earlier this week, I guess I should say, is we definitely asked about, it was the fines and how proportionate they were to what happened with Lastro and Rascal and the craziness that happened there. And Cunning Chaos had this to say: I'd have to say the fines are kind of out of proportion. I think the league needs to step back on the fines for every little infraction that occurs, and also less strictness overall. No more Pepe Frog in the arena. Very sad, frustrated face. They can't have it both ways. Either embrace the scuff stream or don't stream the games in YouTube at all, in my opinion.
I do kind of find it funny here that he's actually blaming the scuff on streaming on YouTube. The actual scuff is definitely going to come from the production, the shelter in place, the at-home production with this producer crew, not the fact that it's on YouTube in general. But
I mean, are they saying it on, I guess, or don't stream the games in YouTube at all? Oh, yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, that is very focused on YouTube there, which, I mean, to be fair, I'm sure there is definitely some functionality lacking in YouTube, but I agree. It's probably not on YouTube nearly as much. There's this weird narrative that, like, YouTube has caused the scuff, and it's like, don't get me wrong, obviously not Twitch, but like we're running like a multi-million-dollar league out of people's bedrooms, you know, like I mean, it's not going to be the same. And there's also a narrative that's like it's the most scuffed league, but going back to his actual point of like they need to be less strict with the fines, and the fines weren't proportional. I can't even think of, like, honestly, that's the other narrative that has really been brought up with Overwatch League, and because I disagree with it. I understand where they're coming from, though, because like I don't think they necessarily should have had fined them right, but it is well within their rights to do so, and it is well within what was proportional, because you know, they were told the game chat was happening. You can't type that stuff when sponsors could be watching, or even, you know, remember that this is, you know, we've seen so many stories that Overwatch League themselves on social media retweeted of just families like moms and dads and whoever else type of families with their kids watching the games. And do you want to see your kid as like the first mention is like, you know, what Lastro and Rascal are saying in game chat, right? Of like a very weird, awkward conversation you might have. And I think it's well within the right. And I don't think fines have ever been so crazy. Like, what fines have really ever happened for Overwatch League that are so nuts?
Yeah, like, I was curious, so I looked it up, and you know, they were saying that the fines were out of proportion or were quite severe, but I was pretty sure that $1,000 is actually the lowest that anyone has ever been fined, and that is correct. So unless you were looking for Lastro and Rascal to get suspended for a number of games, which that would have been
pretty crazy. Yeah,
that would have been crazy. But yeah, the only fine amounts that have been recorded on the discipline tracker are between $1,000 and $3,000. So $1,000.
Yeah, and then the fines have not been like random at times. I feel like it's like we had some relatively inappropriate comments from XQC that was fines. We had the only ones that I would say that was like a minor infraction was like Pepe. It's probably about Pepe's. That's the only one that I'd say is like by far the craziest. But that one also was like, once again, in line with how do you view sponsor obligations, right? Because compared to just about every other esport that isn't LCS, you are sort of a wild west of just TOs doing whatever. And it's a very big divide between, you know, the standardization and like the, you know, how you put sponsors in and how TOs are running and the culture between esports and non-esports. Mm-hmm. And this is sort of a merging of them. And like when at the time there was a lot of negative news stories being spun about Pepe, whether you agree with them or not, like, I mean, what are you going to do? You know, like I can't really blame the league, even if it's, you know, kind of sucky from a viewer perspective. It's like, that doesn't really seem unreasonable necessarily.
Yeah. Now, we are running out of time. We had one more topic to talk about today, but we're going to have to move it to Tuesday's show instead. Next Monday, I believe we're actually having a change to the hero pools. We're having a change to the map pools for competitive. And then also Echo is going live. So if you're looking forward to that conversation, make sure to tune in next Tuesday at 5 p.m. Central when we do talk about those topics and more as per usual.
And also remember, we want to know from you guys, like, who do you think your top 3 is? Do you agree with Reinforce's top 3? Do you agree with me putting Paris at 3? I'm right, I think. But let me know if you think I'm right, because I'm back and about map rotations and hero pools for next week.
Breaking news, Avast thinks he's right.
I know. It's the first, but I do believe it. It is the first.
Regardless, thank you for watching. Wherever you're watching, whether you're on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, or on your favorite podcasting platforms such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure to like, sub, comment, do all those happy, fun things so that we know that you love us, because we know that you do. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'm Jayne. This is Avast, and this has been Contested. See you on Tuesday.